this is a really special day in Washington because everybody gets to have an opinion. So we've decided to get two former presidential speechwriters to have them grade the speech on the content, the quality, and the delivery. So joining me from Washington are Mary Kate Carey. She's a former speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush, and Paul Orszalak, who's a former speechwriter for President Clinton. Thank you very much for making the time for us on what's a busy day for both of you. I've seen you both on other networks and other shows. You've done a terrific job. Mary Kate, let me start with you. What did you think? What did you make of it?
You know, I come from the school that great speeches are made of great stories. So I thought the opening was terrific, where he had that series of stories about Americans. I thought the ending was terrific. Great way to end the speech. I thought Corey Remberg really stole the show and deserved to. But that middle section there reminded me of the line from the Talking Heads, "Same as it ever was." And I thought it was very C+, B-. It was a sort of a liberal laundry list of things that really were not new. It was, how many times do we have to hear about women's rights and poverty and pollution and climate change? And I just thought there wasn't a whole lot of new there. And as a result, I remember thinking at the end this was a very green speech because there was so much recycling going on.
Ooh, hey. Okay, Paul, let me ask you. You know, I've written sections of State of the Union addresses before when I was a speechwriter at the Pentagon, and often State of the Union addresses are really like a big menu. They've got, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I've got a checklist, and it's hard to make that a really inspirational, great speech. Now, President Clinton's State of the Union addresses were always known as really a top drawer. I mean, a par, you know, on a much better sort of level than a lot of other presidents other than Reagan. So what'd you make of it? I mean, could it have been a better speech, or was it just, this is what happens in a State of the Union?
Well, I think if I was grading the president on eloquence, I would give him an A, but as much as it pains me as a speechwriter to say this, I don't think he's being graded on eloquence anymore. It's really a question of how does he make progress in a divided Congress in a divided time. You know, 13,000 times in our nation's history, we've had executive orders by presidents. President Reagan signed 381. FDR signed more than 3,000, but they never advertised it. They just did it. So why advertise in this? Well, because to Mary Kate's point, a lot of these lines are green. The president has talked about a lot of this before Congress, and the same applause lines are applause lines the next year, too. There hasn't been action on a lot of these. Congress has put up the sort of politics of the brick wall. So the president had to show last night that there was a different way forward, and agree with it or not, he led with strategy as much as substance and said, I'd love to do this together, but if not, I'm going to do it alone. Okay, well, more to that point, let's call for our first SOT 1. What do we think of this?
I'm sorry?
The president's
Our job is to reverse these trends. It won't happen right away, and we won't agree on everything. But what I offer tonight is a set of concrete, practical proposals to speed up growth, strengthen the middle class, and build new ladders of opportunity into the middle class. Some require congressional action, and I'm eager to work with all of you. But America does not stand still, and neither will I. So wherever and whenever I can take steps without legislation to expand opportunity for more American families, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, Mary Kate, let me ask you, you know, you were working for a president who had a divided Congress as well. You had to reach across the aisle. Paul, you did too in the Clinton administration. You had to reach across the aisle to Republicans. Is this a good strategy for the president? Mary Kate, what do you think?
I was surprised at how many congressmen applauded that he was saying right to them that he was going over their heads, and they clapped. I thought that was really amazing. In general, I thought the speech was not as confrontational as everybody expected it to be, which was a pleasant surprise. But you know, President Bush had both houses of Congress against him. And yes, he was pretty good in the speeches to be careful not to be too confrontational. But what made the difference was the other 364 days of the year when he was reaching out to the congressmen. He had a lot of friends who were Democrats. He did a lot more things behind the scene than President Obama was willing to do. And so the speech is important, yes, but there was a lot more going on. I think President Clinton was the same way. There was a lot more going on besides the speeches to get things through Congress. And I don't think this president's really willing to do that.
Paul, let me turn to you. This is Paul Orszalak. Yes. He was a speechwriter for President Clinton and has written many of these State of the Union addresses. is this a great idea to keep talking about things that are no winners? I mean, I've got to say, as Mary Kate was saying, this is a green speech, a lot of recycling going on. But could President Obama have done something to reach across the aisle? You know, the American public overwhelmingly, poll after poll after poll, say they want our Republicans and Democrats, Congress and the White House to work together, and yet President Obama was out there staking out new territory where he's going all by himself. How does this play with the base?
Well, honestly, I think the only thing that's lower than the temperature outside right now is probably the approval ratings of both houses of Congress and the president. You know, the people feel generally it's sort of a pox on both your houses. Why can't you just get together to do this? And I was struck last night not just by the State of the Union, but by the fact that there were 3 Republican responses to the State of the Union, which sort of leaves you wondering if he does reach out, and it's, of course he needs to, because we're not going to solve the big things by him going alone, who does he reach out to? If there are 3 different people representing points of view in the party, and frankly Ted Cruz, who issued a pre-rebuttal to the State of the Union earlier, so 4 different responses, it's a sign that, you know, it's not just differences between the president and Congress. There are a lot of differences within Congress, and I think Tea Party, generally Tea Party members, have a completely different agenda, not just from the president, but from mainstream Republicans, and it's something that both sides are dealing with. It's not just the president.
Mary Kate, I think he's got an awfully good point. Rebuttal, whose rebuttal? Everybody's rebuttal. If I were to put you in a different position, instead of writing the president's State of the Union address, turn to you and said, okay, Mary Kate, you write the rebuttal, and you write the rebuttal that brings everybody together, how would you have done it differently? Who would you have chosen? I was thinking last night of the 3 different rebuttals, and I think the 3 of us are probably the only people in the world who watched all 3 of them. But what about...
We watch them so other people don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. But how would you have done it? What would you have done? What state, you know, would you have done it in the states? Would you use a governor? What would you have done to spice that little thing up a little bit?
You know, I actually wrote one in the past. I helped write one, I guess is the proper way to say it, is I helped Christine Todd Whitman the year she did it, which was 1995, right when the Republicans took over the House after 40 years. And in those days, there was only one response, and I think that's a function of the party and who's in charge. And I think somebody should have shut this down last night and said, we will have one response and one response only. But the response that we did that year was the first time it was a woman, first time it was a governor, and the first time it was outside of Washington. And I think that brought a whole breath of fresh air to the whole process. That was the last time, no, excuse me, I take that back. Susan Collins gave the Republican response in 2000 with Bill Frist. And that was the last time there was a woman for the Republican side. And so I thought it was great that they had a woman. And I thought she did a terrific job, and I think she did a great job of distilling the Republican message without getting into a mini State of the Union herself. But if I was in charge, I think for next year, what I would want is a millennial, somebody who is not in Congress, who is a young person who is being affected by all this debt. There's a great organization, the Can Kicks Back, somebody like that, young millennials who can speak to what's the future and how this is all affecting them. And they have a big case on generational inequality. And I think that's where the adults should be listening, is to the young people. So I'd do something different like that, outside of Washington, different generation, and really shake things up a little bit.
Paul, let me ask you, let's just listen to what the president had to say about health care. That's SOT 6, guys.
I do not expect to convince my Republican friends on the merits of this law. But I know that the American people are not interested in refighting old battles. So, again, if you have specific plans to cut costs, cover more people, increase choice, tell America what you do differently. Let's see if the numbers add up. But let's not have another 40-something votes to repeal a law that's already helping millions of Americans like Amanda.
Paul, that got one of the, other than the sergeant who had been injured in Afghanistan, that got some of the biggest applause of the night. Healthcare.
It did.
Obamacare. Now, when you were in the Clinton administration, you had to deal with Hillary Care, and that was a bomb. All the polling shows us that Americans, Republicans, and Democrats may believe in universal health care, that everybody ought to have some kind of health care coverage. Nobody seems to like Obamacare. Did he handle it the right way, or should he have done something different?
I think he did. And, I think we forget a lot that at this point in the life of Medicare, back in 1966, people were calling it a disaster as well. 45% of older Americans didn't have birth certificates to prove their age. 700,000 refused to sign up. And there was an effort to repeal it, just like now. And what happened was that over the few years that followed, all the kinks were worked out, all the programs were explained, and by the following summer, 19 million seniors had signed up. And of course, today, 98% or so of older Americans depend on Medicare every day. Now, I know, the Republican Party generally voted against that then and is generally against Obamacare now, but I don't think anybody's pining for the day when you could lose your coverage or be denied coverage because of a pre-existing condition. And I know that this is the lead talking point this year in our midterm elections. I know that Obamacare is front and center in a lot of districts, but in truth, 3 million people have signed up now through the exchanges. They're close to getting on track, and by the time this rolls around in November, there could very well be 10, 15 million more people signed up. It could be working well, and the power of the message now isn't going to play then. So I think he played it right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think it's awfully optimistic of you, Paul.
Yes, thank you.
He's an
I'm nothing but an optimist, we speechwriters.
There you go. Hey, thank you both for taking the time to join us. Mary Kate Carey, who is a former speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush, and Paul Orszalak, who was President Clinton's speechwriter in the Clinton administration. Thank you both for joining us, offering your perspective and good advice for whoever gives the next State of the Union rebuttal and speech. Thanks so much.